Hello everyone, Ladislas Maurice from thewanderinginvestor.com. So today I'm with Francisco and we shall be discussing how to obtain residency in Brazil. So Francisco, you have a firm helping people move to Brazil, birth tourism, etc. So can you tell us about the different ways a foreigner can get residency in Brazil?
Yeah, so there's a number of ways. The easiest one, of course, if you have the family reunification option, so if you give birth in Brazil, the kid becomes Brazilian, you can get PR right away. Same thing if you're married or in a stable union to a Brazilian, then you can also get PR right away. Besides this, there is the option for nationals of preferred countries. So basically from all of the Portuguese-speaking countries, you can get the CPLP visa, show 1,500 regular income, and then you can progress to PR in 2 years. There's the Mercosur visa, so if you're Argentinian or Colombian, national, not resident. So if you have Paraguay residency, this doesn't count. But if you're a national of one of these countries, then you can also apply for PR, then 2 years, and then you go for PR. Besides this, there is the work visa option. Depending how you're getting hired, you can get even a permanent work visa that can lead to citizenship. And of course, this can also be structured if the person is looking to create their own company, and can be done, especially for startups and for executives. There is a preference there to get straight to PR.
But it needs to be a real business? Can you just, in some countries, you just create a company, hire yourself as director, and boom, you get residency this way? Or do you actually need to be
you have to be employed, so you need to have a local salary, you have to have the social security contributions, and but yes, it's possible to structure it with your own local, structuring your own local business. And then there is the retiree visa option, so if you have 2,000 USD monthly regular income, and then this does not have to be solely pension income. So if you have, let's say, 800 USD of pension, but then you have some rentals on the side, then you can complement it to reach the 2K. And then the most interesting one, I would say, that leads to PR is the investor visa. And then here you have many options. You can do business ventures, you can invest in the country, and you can also buy real estate. So this also qualifies.
All right, let's talk about this in detail. So let's say I come to you, Francisco, and I say I want to move to Brazil. I have money to invest. I want to do the investor visa. Talk me through it.
Okay, so we can help with the entire investor visa process, be it through the business option or the real estate option. For the business option, it's usually 500,000 reais. So this will depend on the exchange rate at the time, but it's about 100K, a bit less. If you're investing through an existing legal entity, then it's 600,000. So if you're investing as an individual, 500, then as an entity, 600. And if you're doing a startup investment, then that's 150,000 reais that you have to invest. So 35K roughly. So this would be the business side. Then there is the real estate investment side, which allows you to buy urban real estate. If you're getting rural real estate, then there's a series of additional requirements and complications. So we're talking urban real estate here. If you're investing in the north and the northeast regions, which are overall the poorer, least developed regions of Brazil, then it's 700,000 reais, so roughly 125K. And if you're investing in the other regions of Brazil, so center, east, south, and southeast, then it's 1 million reais, so about 180K. So mostly when people are going for the cheaper options, they go for the northeast instead of the north, because that's where all the coastal beach cities are, like the perpetual Caribbean weather. So Salvador, Recife, João Pessoa, Fortaleza, Pipa, big expat hub nowadays. That's the northeast options. And then in the south, very popular with expats, Florianopolis currently because it's safer, Rio de Janeiro, of course. And then you can also check other options like São Paulo or Curitiba, depending on each person's preferences.
Cool. So let's say I want to go with the real estate option, which is the most logical. So I think there's a lot of corpses of people trying to do business,
in Brazil.
So let's focus on the reasonable option. So I choose a property, I go through the purchase process, I have the title deed in hand. What do you need from me? What documents do you need from me? What are the timelines? Talk me through it.
Okay, so Brazil is a bit of a bureaucratic country to say the least. So there's a couple bureaucratic things we have to keep in mind even before the property purchase, which is to be able to buy a property, you first have to get the CPF. And the CPF is this tax number in Brazil that's going to be used for everything. So for a bank account, for the residency, for anything, like buying a bus ticket in Brazil, they ask you for the CPF.
It was terrible. I remember being in Rio, I had to send a DHL quite urgently, and they asked me for a CPF. I was like, I'm not a resident here, I just need to send a DHL. They're like, sorry.
Yeah.
So we had to use someone else's CPF.
The thing is, Brazil currently doesn't have much tourism and doesn't have that many expats compared to, let's say, Mexico or so. So all of our internal systems, for pharmacies to restaurants to everything, they're considering that the client is going to be Brazilian, right? Like 90% of Brazil's tourism is internal tourism from other Brazilian states. So it's now that there's more international demand, this is beginning to change. For example, until 2 years ago, it was almost impossible to get a bank account as a non-resident. But now, because so many Brazilians are leaving, and also because many foreigners are coming, there's been a number of banks that started offering these non-resident accounts, right? They're called the CDEs, Conta de Domiciliado no Exterior. So even for like buying real estate or so, right? Before you had to send international SWIFT transaction from outside, now you can actually get a bank account before you become a resident. So for the purchase itself, you're gonna have to get the CPF. This can be requested remotely from outside of Brazil. We can do the whole process online. You can expect a month to get this number. Then you can purchase the property, you get the title. Then we're going to need the birth certificate or your marriage certificate, apostille, passport, all the documentation from the property.
Criminal background check as well.
Criminal background check. And then you're going to have to go to the federal police in Brazil. That's where they take all the registrations for foreigners. So you're going to get the RNE, which is into the registration foreigners. And then you're going to get a separate ID card, the CRNM, for foreigners also. Timeline is a bit hard to say. It depends also where you're going to process this, because there's many different places from the Polícia Federal and how they're on. Brazil varies, but you can expect from several weeks to as long as 12 months. But the main point is, when you apply for the residency, while you're waiting for the documentation to come out, you can already, use your property and stay in Brazil. You don't have to wait until everything, like for the 12 months until you can actually come and spend time in Brazil.
So you do this and you get permanent residency.
So for the investor visa, you're going to get a temporary residency.
Okay.
And you're supposed to stay at least 30 days during this period in Brazil. And then after the 2 years, you can convert it to permanent residency if you still kept the property, right? So you're not supposed to sell it. Once you're a permanent resident, then you are going to progress onto the citizenship, and then you have no requirements
to apply for citizenship after PR. So essentially, I can come, I buy the property, blah blah, CPF, etc. Then I just need to spend 30 days in 2 years on temporary residency to then get my permanent residency. Am I getting this correct?
Yes, so you only have to spend 30 days during this residence period if you're a real estate investor, and then you can convert to the permanent residency later on. They're going to want to see that you still have the property, but then once you progress to PR, then you start counting the time for the citizenship. The regular naturalization time is 4 years. However, if you are married to a Brazilian, or you have a Brazilian child, so if you give birth, the child is automatically Brazilian, so many do that. If you have a Brazilian child or are from a Portuguese-speaking country by origin, like Portugal, Angola, whatever, then you can apply for it in 1 year of PR. If you are recognized for extraordinary feats of science, of arts, and so on, then, or like business, philanthropy, 2 years. Otherwise, the regular period is 4 years. And the important thing is, so you can qualify for the citizenship, you're supposed to stay 9 months per year of the aggregate period that you have to qualify for. So if you're qualifying in 1 year, you have to spend 9 months in Brazil. If you're qualifying on the basis of 4 years, then you have to spend, out of those 4 years, 3 of them in Brazil. It doesn't have to be like 9 months per exact year, but on the aggregate of the 4 years, you should have spent 3 years in Brazil. So this is not a citizenship that you're going to get like, oh, just gonna get the property, I'm gonna travel around, and then I'm gonna collect a passport later on. Unfortunately, you actually are supposed to put the time in so you can qualify for the citizenship.
So let's say I'm not looking for citizenship and I just want permanent residency as a plan B without necessarily wanting to spend that much time in Brazil. Do I risk losing my permanent residency if I don't spend X amount of time in the country? How does it work?
So you're not supposed to stay outside of Brazil for more than 2 consecutive years in a row. So similar to Panama, you can come back for a few days every 2 years or so. You can present a justification if you have some reason for being abroad for longer than this, and then they can let you stay longer. But in general,
check in every 2 years.
Check in every 2 years.
Okay, so let's say I do this. Let's say I have a Brazilian girlfriend, I get PR this way, and then I just want to use it as a plan B. Now, I just check in every 2 years. Does Brazil consider me a tax resident with a PR?
This is one of the main reasons why I would say that if you're looking to get PR in Brazil, that you should go for the citizenship, right? That you should really consider spending the time in getting the document. Because in the understanding of the Federal Revenue Service, they have the 6-month rule, right? The 183-day rule, if you're a temporary resident. So if you're a temporary resident and you're spending over 6 months, then you become a tax resident. But for PR, the moment you step in Brazil with a PR, you automatically become a tax resident. And here is the thing. So you become a tax resident. We can talk about the tax situation in Brazil in a bit. But when you're a tax resident, if you want to stop being a tax resident, you have to do this declaration of departure, which is very easy to do. It's not an exit tax by any means. It's just a partial tax filing, like for the part of the year you were in Brazil. But when you hand in this definitive departure thing, you lose the PR. And if you're Brazilian, on the other hand, if I do this, I do the definitive departure, I'm no longer a tax resident, and then if I want, next year I change my mind, I can just come back. Right, and then for that year I wasn't a tax resident, but then for the year after I decided, no, I'm coming back to Brazil, and then I can do it again. So I've already seen some cases, for example, an Argentinian client of mine, he married a Brazilian, had Brazilian kids, lived in Brazil for like 10 years, and now with the current political situation, with Lula, the rising taxes, he wants to leave, but he never went for his citizenship. So if he does the exit now, he loses his PR, and then if he wants to get citizenship later, he's going to have to, apply for PR again and do it all over again. So now we're doing his citizenship application so that after he becomes a citizen, then he can depart, and should the situation change, he comes back anytime he wants.
So what about when people live in a country that has a double tax treaty agreement with Brazil? So let's say I'm in Toronto, I have Brazilian PR as a plan B. Brazil considers me a tax resident, but I'm actually spending 9 months per year in Canada. And according to the double tax treaty, I'm probably only a tax resident in Canada. Does Brazil actually recognize these matters? And how does it work concretely? Let's say I'm your client, I have PR, and I tell you, Francisco, I know I have permanent residency in Brazil. I know they consider me a tax resident, but I believe I'm not because of this double tax treaty agreement, which protects me.
Yes.
What are the steps that need to be taken to make sure I'm not running into major issues?
So first of all, in this case, you'd have to use the double tax treaty and read what it says regarding tax residency. So usually in the tax treaties that I've read from Brazil and other countries, the main criteria are where you have your definitive center of life, right? Where you have a permanent dwelling. And otherwise, if you don't have, or if you have it in both, then where you're spending most of your time, where you're living, your day-to-day. So in this case, it would fall on the basis of Canada or Uruguay or Spain or these countries where Brazil has a treaty.
So you still need to file a return every year in Brazil, or some sort of document to file to say I'm not a tax resident?
So you have to use the double tax treaty, like go into it with a lawyer in Brazil to claim this, and that you're not a tax resident. This would be an extraordinary circumstance, let's say. Most cases, not saying this is recommended or legal, but usually when people have this PR and they're living somewhere else, they don't have any Brazilian income to tax or declare, so they just don't don't declare anything, right? And since the Brazilian federal revenue doesn't know your other assets in this case, then
this is not tax advice.
This is not tax advice. This is not recommended. This is not what you should do. I'm just saying, like, the usual way is just people don't do it. Of course, you're supposed to declare all of your assets and all of your income when you're a tax resident in Brazil. In any case, there is tax compensation. So if you're already paying tax in Canada or in another country, then Brazil recognizes it, even when there's no tax treaty. So in the case, for example, of you're paying a 30% withholding on U.S. dividends, then you can credit that entire amount in Brazil. And since the top tax rate in Brazil is 27.5, then if you're paying anywhere above that, you're not going to pay anything else in Brazil.
Cool. So, because generally speaking, Brazil is tax hell, right?
In general, Brazil is a tax hell, and the taxes are increasing. So, especially import taxes or taxes on like real businesses, they're super high, some of the highest in the world. But there are a number of ways to pay low income tax legally. And in fact, when I work with Brazilian clients moving to Europe, they're often shocked at how much more tax they're going to have to pay, even when they go to these special tax regimes like the Portuguese NHR or like Malta or whatever. So in Brazil, there's a couple options to optimize. First of all, when you're already a resident, and this is only for residents, there is the Simples Nacional regime, which is a regime for small companies up to 4.8 million reais turnover per year. So that's like 800,000 USD yearly income. So most people, be them contractors or independent like remote entrepreneurs, they're all setting up these Simples Nacional companies, and there you don't pay tax on your profits, you pay tax on your gross turnover. And then for most people, like earning, let's say, 100 to 300K USD per year, you're going to pay between 3 to 15% tax total.
That's not too bad.
Currently, there is no taxation of dividends from Brazilian dividends exclusively. So you pay this tax at the company level, and then when you distribute the dividend to yourself, there's no additional tax to be paid. So total income tax for a lot of these people is between 3 to 10, 15. Now, this is using a local Brazilian company. There's also the option if you have a foreign company, right? Let's say you have a US LLC and you're living in Brazil. So since 2024, there is an offshore law that went into effect that basically says if you live in Brazil and you have a company outside of Brazil that is paying under 20% corporate income tax, or that is located in one of the tax havens according to Brazil, then you're supposed to pay 15% flat tax on the profits of those companies even if they're not distributed. So let's say the profits attributable to you. You have a US LLC, 100% of that LLC belongs to you, and you have 100K profit for that year. So you're supposed to pay 15% of that tax on your personal income tax in Brazil. If you leave the money in the company and you decide to invest, that tax has already been paid. So if you decide to distribute the money later on, there's no additional tax on the distribution. However, if you do distribute it, it's the same 15%. So especially for those that are considering nationality in Brazil,
that's not too bad.
We don't know if they will try to raise taxes in other ways as they're currently doing. Currently, the government is focusing on things like VAT and
it's a bigger one.
And so on. So there's at least no plan to change that for the offshore companies. So 15% flat tax. You live in Brazil from 1 to 4 years under PR, can get citizenship. And then if you want to leave later, there is no exit tax. So you can simply exit, realize your capital gains, and then if you want, come back after a year or two and enjoy the capital gains that you had. So Simples Nacional companies is a big one. Offshore companies is a big one. And then, especially for those who are doing local real estate and you have residency, it's important to mention, taxes on rents in Brazil are up to 27.5% if you're earning the rents as an individual resident in Brazil. But if you run them through a local company, then they have this regime that you can take for local companies called presumed profit, lucro presumido, where you're going to pay 15% tax on your rental income. So you can basically cut it in half if you own the property through a company instead of owning the property directly as an individual. So that's another tax optimization opportunity for real estate investors.
Interesting. So you can help people with all of this residency, all the tax stuff, all of that?
Yes, so we can help getting all of the different residencies in Brazil. So investor residency, family reunification, retiree, etc. And then on the tax side, help structure Simples Nacional companies or local holding companies for real estate, as well as help with accounting for offshore companies. So if you have a US LLC or an EVIS company or a BVI, whichever offshore company you have this 15% flat tax. But the thing is, you have to present the company's accounting in Brazil. And the thing is, a lot of these jurisdictions don't need audited accounting usually, so you're going to have to hire an accountant to present it in Brazil. You can present in international accounting standards, or you can use Brazilian accounting standards to present this. And we have local tax jurists and accountants who can help provide these declarations and accounting for the company.
Cool. Fantastic. Great. All right. So if you're interested, there is a link below. You can find more information and get in touch directly with Francisco. All right.
Thank you, Ladislas.
Make sure to download my free ebook, 12 Mistakes to Avoid When Investing in International Real Estate, which you can find on my website, link below. And feel free to follow me on Instagram @TheWandering Investor. I look forward to hearing from you.